Here's Denny, Mike, and Drew.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to have some fun. I have no idea what we're talking about. But we got Mike Pennacchi here after many try. And he's a busy man. He really doesn't need any instructions, introduction to that anyway. In fact, other than because all I'm going to do is read off the webpage because I can't afford to make mistakes. But Tim, you can make mistakes. You can afford to make mistakes.
It's dangerous for me to introduce Mike.
Yeah, go for it.
We've known each other, I don't know, how long I was, what, 12 when we met? I'm just joking.
Sure. Well, Mike was born in 1999, so can't be that long.
Well, I wasn't, so we won't go there. Now, everybody, I've known Mike quite a while, and I rate him as one of the top 5 analysts that I have ever met, and I've met a few people in my life. I've been in diagnostics since the 70s, network diagnostics, even before we had things like Ethernet. Back Vint Cerf and I and Rob Kahn were mucking with X25 and packet switching. That's probably the first time we ever had connectionless communications. And that's a long time. And one thing I like about Mike is he is an incredible instructor. And one of the biggest things with an instructor or a teacher is getting people motivated, getting people excited about the technology. And Mike does that because he has a mannerism that's casual, smart, and the good news is we don't live near each other or we would be in trouble all the time. Right, Mike?
Or what? Yes, we'd be down in your be down in your basement building stuff, Tim.
Yeah, so, but everybody, Mike has been around. I don't know how many years he's been teaching at Interop. I've even worked with him a couple of times.
You taught Mike. You taught at Interop since the right?
So I mean, this Interop's a big one for me because this is 20 years.
20 years. Yeah.
I attended Atlanta '95 was when I attended Interop. I was a network technology manager for a company. I was doing packet captures, and someone handed me this sheet, and they said, "You need to go." There's this group called Pine Mountain Group that's talking. You need to go see these guys. And for me, when I went to that conference, that was when I decided I wanted to dedicate my efforts to doing protocol analysis and troubleshooting. And so I went one more year in Vegas, quit my job. And in '97, I started teaching classes at Interop. So it's this is 20 years of attending Interop, and I've been an instructor, attendee, lead network engineer, sponsor, a lot of different things.
Now you taught at Interop nonstop. I mean, for the last 20 years, you taught every year.
Yeah, there was a couple. I've missed a couple of Interops. One was my son was going to be born, and I was going to be in Atlanta, and I knew that I couldn't get home fast enough. So Tony Fortunato went and took my space that year, but I've been to a Interop every year for the last 20 years, and for the most part, 2 of them.
You know, the late 90s, the 99 to 2000 had a kind of special significance to me. Engineers designing sheet metal boxes, and then I ran my first company, and that was sort of the beginning and the end. I mean, almost coincide with one another of the telecom Interop.
Well, I mean, we certainly saw where we went from having a tent out in the parking lot, Las Vegas Convention Center, and having people out there. I mean, it reduced the number of people coming to the Interop, but what we found was that the people that are attending now are real serious about it.
Yeah.
I mean, they're coming to the opportunity to see all of these network hardware and software events, and also, for a lot of people, this may be the only chance they get to get education for the year. And so I
don't know, Mike, but I was the guy that wrote the first conservation law of telecom bubble. It's the conservation law of single malt liquor. If you don't drink too much on the way up, you don't drink too much on the way up, you don't drink too much on the way down. And I basically, in 18 months, we saw both up and down, right?
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I was there in Atlanta on September 11th. And so, we were waiting around for the planes to take off. And some buddies of mine at Fluke rented a van and drove all the way back to.
We got a little bit of time, Mike. Tell us about that. I know Tim was there too, and I know of quite a few people that were there. And that was an amazing experience. Tell us just a little bit about that. How specifically, not just how we as a citizen connected to the event, but as a network engineer. What was that special thing kind of go across your head?
Well, right off, some of the things that get me are, I had just gotten done reading a series of books called Net Force, or Tom Clancy series, and so all of a sudden, when people are saying planes are flying in buildings, and yeah, it kind of was a little too close to some of those watching that take place. From a networking standpoint, I got the week after that I guess was good and bad. I was part of a group of 5 people that went to the Pentagon and rebuilt helped rebuild the networks there. They had rebuilt the networks, but they weren't performing well. And so I spent 2 weeks at the taking it back together and making it work right.
I heard a little bit of that story from Brian Chi, and
yeah,
that had to be amazing. Basically, like walking into a war zone, right?
We were, and it's one of those things where we went into a work environment where people there had coworkers that were killed. And so rarely do we go into a network problem where, a lot of times it may be down and people aren't feeling good, but to go into an environment where they died the week before was pretty significant. And it was a good experience to see how things were run network-wise, and it was great to be able to help out with that.
Yeah, I want to just talk a little bit more, and then we go off something else. I just want to bring out, like none of us here. I mean, Tim has his collection of firearms, and he's big on the Second Amendment and all that, of liberty, and I admire that. But for the most part, we're not make up for being soldiers, and so essentially got called in or volunteer to be to protect our fellow citizens. But it turns out that as a network engineers, we internalized, didn't we? We all felt that, look, it's time for us to do our part, right?
Yeah, it was like walking into a morgue. I went both days, but I was on alert. All of us went on full alert, so we carried all of our weapons and radios, and because we didn't know how far, this was going to go. If this was just a attack, or there was going to be more, and was there going to be boots on the ground? There was a lot of concern, and also the social ramifications. A lot of people, when I remember and walking up to the Microsoft booth, and Microsoft was renting buses and cars, everything they could hold of people home, and there were people just uncontrollably crying, and the whole nation was in shock. But it was really pretty tough to be at a show where it's typically, very vibrant and people are talking and happy, and just, literally, Interop, you could drop something on the ground and you could hear it bounce.
Well, the reason I kind of wanted generation, but sort of half a generation before me, people who want to talk about where they were when Kennedy was shot. That was sort of the event. It was sort of it got drawn into conscience. Now, of course, we're not maybe we're not quite yet to talk about where we were 9/11 because it's still too raw. But I bet at some point people will start to talk about that, and then there's just a few hundred people who were at Interop at the same time, and that had to be a special experience. I know. I wasn't there. I was too busy running my own company, and just a personal note. I remember coming to work on Tuesday morning, and instead of working, everybody's watching TV. I was a little bit upset, because they weren't working, and I saw the plane crashing into the first tower, and I said, well, so what? That happens. But of course, that quickly was not the case when you see the second plane, and I don't know. I remember my first thought was, shit, I should have laid off half of the company last week and not just 1/3.
Yeah.
To get orders in, and the whole nation went in freeze mode. It was for months after 9/11. People you'd call people up and try to get them interested in a product, or they'd call you and they were like, weakened. And
it's funny, Tim. It's funny you said that. Like we were like warriors. Like selling a product. We would just get on the plane no matter what. I remember for 5 days, not quite a week, we weren't supposed to fly, and I basically flew out on the Wednesday of the next week, and I got into Manhattan, and you can the smell there and the dust, but you just keep pushing, and because there was that magical power that would just come up, and we just have to otherwise the living.
Yep. Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yep.
And as the network engineers, we just have to keep, you have this, all of a sudden you have this special calling, we were like the first responders in our own way. Very few people can relate to that.
And to that end, I was out doing some training for AOL not long after that, and they said they brought up 144 servers that day so that they could support the single web page that CNN had. So CNN was down to one web page. I mean, there was no depth. You went out, and this is what one cared about. But to all of that traffic, they had to bring up another 150 servers. So from a networking standpoint, we really see that communication has become such a key point of everything. And from a military, the involvement I've had with doing training for various groups there, communication, any order that goes out anymore goes out over some sort of network connection. So we find the whole networking component of it, the cyber warfare, the communications, are as important as a lot of the other pieces.
So how much of your training stuff you can't talk about anymore? So don't talk about the stuff you can't talk about.
A lot of the stuff I do is unclassified. I mean, TCP is TCP, network discovery is network discovery. I have had instances where I was working with a group where they were classified, I wasn't, so they said just talk and we'll pull out of it what we're interested in, which was great. I got to sit there and just babble on for a week, which is my favorite thing to do. But yeah.
Well, I saw in 2005 we started selling. I mean, it really changes, and I just want to kind of follow up that trend. It really changes the whole psychic, right? That network is a bloodline now. I mean, there were data that showed that if you put little plug, the country just stops, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And, so again, kind of starting with that, which sort of coincides with when you started teaching, and you were employee, right?
Right.
Weren't you?
Yep.
For a while.
Yep.
When did you start your own company? And if to the extent you can talk about, how did you decide to be on your own?
2002 was when I started my company, and I decided that I wanted to go in a different direction. And for better or worse, after traveling for 5 years, going out doing these classes, I didn't think I could work for anybody. And that, in a way, that's kind of where I've fallen. That I have so much autonomy over what I do. That
I don't think you need to explain that too much, Mike. I'm not just unemployed. I'm employable.
But
no, I get that. I get that.
And so I've been very fortunate. I've had a phenomenal relationship over that entire works. They've kept me very busy, and so by doing work with Fluke, and by doing work on my own, I couldn't ask for a better job.
Yeah,
By
the way, there are not that many people like you, and I find it interesting that you kind of wear this multiple hat, right? You're individual contributor. You sign the front of the check most of the time, not just the back of the check.
Yep.
And you run your own business. You're a teacher. You educate a community, but at the same time you're a mentor, right? A lot of young people like Chris Greer, kind of grew under your wing, and you in a way got someone else's wing, right?
Yep.
And it always reminds me of that movie Kung Fu, where the guy just branded his arms, like. I suspect that you guys have the invisible arm, thing on your arm. where you're on your own, well, good luck to you.
Well, and that's one of the things I found is that some of the things that I learned early on. There's always a solution to the problem, and we can't get to that solution if we can't measure it. And so really a big part of what I've focused on over the years is how do we measure what's happening, and how do we differentiate between that works with that doesn't work, and then come up with a solution. And one of my big things, and I keep telling like this, I had a class in LA this week, I tell them, I'm trying to take the S word out of networking, and that's should. Too often people say that should fix it, or that should do it, or that should be, that should have been it. But nobody verifies. They don't validate that yes, that is exactly what it was. We found this problem, we formulated this fix, and then we know that's going to take the problem. I want to build that confidence in people.
Yeah.
And that's one of the problems we have today is people, we have security issues, and people say, we took, and we find out 6 months later that there's an advanced persistent threat there.
Yep.
You've got to finish it. And I want to say one thing about Mike. If there ever was a consummate geek, it would be a real big, okay? Wake up and we finally get together because we miss each other a lot. We can sit on the phone for an hour talking about one thing that he tried to do, or, it's a lot of fun being around Mike, and I know why that people at Interop love him to come back. And Andrew, you can attest to how many people want Mike to teach and how much they enjoy that.
Yeah, well, the fact that he's been teaching for so long, he's consistently rated one of the estimate, I think, to his skill, to the passion he has for the subject, his ability to communicate some real essential information to folks. And this time around in Las Vegas 2015, one of his classes, we had to schedule him on 2 days concurrent just to handle the overload. I think it's for the performance class, right, Mike?
Yep. I got to say, it felt pretty good in Austin hiking last week, and we were out on a trail, and I get this email from, I think, Madeline. Somebody said, hey, or why not? Do another one. So that was pretty
well,
good.
Tim mentioned Tom Breath, and Tony has been a great contributor to, but I even think that many good instructors have in common is that they actually audience. They have a very deep audience, and I don't mean that as a person. There is that interaction. They love it. It's like being a stage actor. They go up to the stage, and there's this sense of value, right? You're giving people something. Not everyone. Half of them might be taking a nap. You don't know, right? Dreaming, because it's not easy for them to get 3 days off like that. I don't you get a lot back?
Oh, I tell people in class, one, I get as much out of them as hopefully they get out of me, and for a lot of reasons. One is there has not been a class I've done where somebody said, hey, example, let me grab my little, Tim talks about me being a geek, right? So I got my Raspberry Pi 2, right? So I've been working with these, I've with the Pis. Well, this week, it's talking about I got my new Raspberry Pi 2, and one of the guys goes, well, what about the banana Pi? It's like, the banana Pi. So
Mike, you still owe me an article on that. People still want number 2 on.
Okay, well, I got number 2 right here.
All right.
But and so because what it does is it gives me an opportunity to talk to people that are out there, find out what are they worried about, what are their concerns. Right on, Denny. I mean, I never did any acting. In high school or anything like that. But it is to get up when we have a couple hundred people in class and teach. It is an opportunity for me to prove myself. I mean, if I stand up there and I can talk about what I know, and I don't get thrown out of the room, then what I'm talking about must be somewhat valid and be of interest to people. So as an instructor, an audience. And here's the other thing that I always think is interesting. People will say, well, this is basic. This is basic stuff you're covering in some cases. I said, but I have to keep repeating. And repeating it over and over again has so drilled it into who I am that when I go out and troubleshoot problems, I don't second guess what I'm doing. I think sometimes we tend to skip over what is basic, the basics, and we want to jump to the advanced. And by skipping those basics, we have problems.
Well, I suspect that I seen you guys work, and listen, I know skill, but just different personality, right? I mean, of course you're gonna have people who come to you, oh, Mike, come on, you know, why are you still drawing on the basic? Tell me something I don't know already. I pay good money for this, right? And
Yep.
you know, and then there are people who says, "Look, Mike, what are you doing? You know, I'm here to learn something. You're way over my right." And I taught at university. Now the difference is that at a university is I don't know. You know, your job is different. You know why they're there. They want to learn something. So, but you know, and one of the trick, right? And in being an instructor is you got 100 students in the class. Who do you talk to, right? And who do you do? How do you do that? And you're like this. Everything you do, I see you work, and you're like this bi-directional. You know, you're talking, you're looking, you know, you're listening, you're trying to figure it out. You know, you're really tracking the pulses, so to speak, right?
Right.
Because it's really tough. I mean, that hour and a half that you're on the stage is a tough gig, man.
It's actually 3 hours.
I mean,
no, I was thinking about the bio break in between, but you're right.
Oh,
3 hours. Yeah.
And for a lot of those years, they were one day to remind me to take a break, because once I get going, I'm not looking at my watch going, when's the next break? Yeah. But you know, talk about who do I talk to? Tony. I stay in contact with Tony. Chris and I, you know, with him being in South America, Central America, it's made a little harder to stay in touch. I think it's funny they won't allow the three of us to be in the same country really at any one time. Because, you know,
now, Mike, we're too good of friends here for me to be gentle with you.
Yeah.
I have a comment here, a question and answer, and you can't see it because I haven't selected yet, and I'm not going to tell you who it is that said it. And he says, and with great respect, he says, "Careful, you're going to swell his head." I don't know what that means. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that means. Now, I think what it means is that people, not just you, but all of us, me included, you know, people can react one or two ways. They might think that we have big ego. Oh, this is guy that. But yeah. I want to come to your defense. Because Mike, I just want to catch on to what you said, is that you're out there on stage. I mean, you're on stage. You're on adrenaline, and that's what keeps you going.
Mm-hmm.
And you can interpret one way or the other, right?
Yep.
Well, Mike, when I mentioned
that's obvious to you, right? Some people might say, "Oh, Mike, you know, he's got too big of ego. Who needs him?"
Oh, I haven't heard that one.
I never have either.
That worries me now.
I've never heard that. No.
No, you don't sense that?
That I have too big an ego?
No, I'm not saying that you do, but I'm saying that some people might. And I get it all the time, right? When, you know, like that's who we are. People.
Yeah, and it's tough as far as being a small business owner. You have to really believe in what it is you're doing, and I believe in what I'm doing. But really, when it comes down to it, when I went to Interop in '95 and '96, I listened to Scott Hogdahl, and Scott's presenting at Interop this year, I believe, at Bill Alderson. These guys gave me the information I needed to dig myself out of a lot of network problems. And so really, that's my goal. My goal isn't to build a big, huge company and so on. In fact, it'll probably never get bigger than just a few people. But my goal is to collect as much information as I can and disseminate what I can out to folks and help them get their jobs done. Because I know a lot of people don't have the time to dedicate to digging through packets. Like
Yeah.
And I know
Hey,
as a
Mike, you know, like I'm probably not that far wrong if I were to say that, you know, like one of the time was one of your protege, right? And of course,
yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
yeah, and Chris always
Great.
he probably doesn't need much advice these days anymore. He's on his own and he's doing great. I use a little bit of a time and just kind of talk about talk to some of the younger folks out there who wants to, you know, who look up to you, and who says, hey, you know, I want to build my own brand. I want to be like Mike Pennacchi, but you know, and it's non-trivial, right? I mean, you put a lot of energy into this, and you have a great brand,
Yep.
you, and I am sure you don't take it for yeah. But what would be the advice, one or two advice that you would give to a young person who just want to say, hey, I can be on my own. I can do what Mike does in action. You know, what would it take for someone else to do something like that?
I would say humility is part of it. I would say that when I go out and meet with people is not to say you're stupid for having made this mistake. And in fact, my goal in most cases is I don't even want us to know that I had to have anything to do with it. I always tell people you don't even have to tell them that I helped you fix this problem. My goal is to help them build their credibility and build the absolute main thing. And in all honesty, fixing the problem for me is a huge piece of it. And I don't really have to have somebody pat me on the back and say, "Good job, you fixed that, you saved our company," whatever. Fixing it is the biggest thing for me, and helping that person on their own. And so I would say that, you know, some of the pieces are making sure that you don't come in saying I know everything. The second one is, and this one on one of my first analysis jobs, don't go into jobs blaming people. Be very careful when you do the analysis. Find out what it's not and exonerate those people. Because if I come in and I think it's Drew that did it, Drew's going to be pissed off at me and he's not going to do anything to help me. Whereas if I say I know it's not Tim, Tim's going to say, man, they've been blaming me. Whatever you need, I'll help you. And then I say, we work our way toward that. So, and I made that mistake on my first job, and I learned my lesson there. Not trying to get the first answer, but get the right answer. Notions.
By the way, you just got a good. Let me click on this so you can see it. And this one is from Dan Klinke. And Dan says, I don't know if you can see it, but let me read it anyway. So Dan says, seriously now, having worked with Mike for the last 18 years, I am from Fluke also. I can come to Mike as a true partner. He is the real deal. Our customers love what he does. You have to pay me for this show, Mike.